So what does customer training look like? And I've been giving you samples as we go through here. And I try, and my team tries, not to stand on a soapbox and say, this is good and this is bad. But there are a few exceptions where I am willing to say this is good and this is bad. And I've already mentioned microlearning. I feel very strongly that a video longer than 7 minutes is not going to be consumed by most of your learners. At least not as effectively as you would like it to be. That's not to say that 30 minutes of training is a bad thing. It's just you've got to think about what are your learning objectives every 5 to 7 minutes, if not shorter. And for those of you who have customers or employees who are, to use this term, millennials or younger, who are always on their devices and always doing multitasking and a bunch of different things, the attention span of learners in general is dropping. And the duration of acceptable learning nuggets is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I like to see things 2.5 minutes or shorter. And again, it's not to say that you can train someone in a fantastically complicated product in 2.5 minutes. You can't. It might take a week. But you think about the training challenge in terms of individual learning objectives. So what am I going to teach this 5-minute period? What are the objectives? And then it makes it somewhat easier to actually phrase that part of the training. So you don't just do the throw it all out and see what sticks to the wall kind of approach. It's very focused. It's very thoughtful. The other benefit of doing microlearning is that you can validate learning. You can assess after each of these nuggets. And instead of a week of training or a 7-hour series of webinars followed by a 30-question quiz, which leads to a certification, which leads to a bunch of people scratching their head saying, what did I just learn? You can actually validate learning as you go. And learning platforms allow you to do that. I mean, ours as well as many others. And I think it's really important that you think about not just what am I delivering and how am I delivering it, but how am I measuring the success? Because if you're measuring the success, and we'll see this in the next slide, there's a lot of really important stuff that you can glean from that. So I'm going to go back to, in the sample in this case, I'm going to go back to this this demo we did for a bunch of training professionals, grown-ups if you will, who got to play with Lego robotics, again in a 5 or 10 minute experience. So in this particular case, we needed to walk them through how to do complicated programming. We could have done a 30-minute video, but it was way beyond our time frame. So this is an example of software simulation. So you see, I don't have any software installed. I'm running in a web browser, as you can tell. But you can walk a learner through the steps to achieve a particular task. And it's interactive. So I'm being told, oops, you clicked the wrong spot, try again. So while this is very much on rails, like I'm not allowing the user to click anywhere and do anything, if they need to do that, they need to be in the software. This is a great way to walk someone through a very basic experience and measure and validate their success as they go through. So you can provide a combination of guidance and training and instruction as they go. And you can do all kinds of things. So you can have an interactive experience where you teach all kinds of different stuff. And it can incorporate audio and video and clickable stuff and games and all kinds of things like that. So I wanted to put this out there just as kind of a prompting example for what you can achieve with a complicated product with just a couple minutes at a time. And again, if you were to watch this whole thing linearly, it's about 90 minutes long, but it's all carved into 2-minute experiences. And it allows the learner to dive into what they need to just at that moment. So again, I think the final content slide here is about, how do we lead to a real person at just the right point? And I talked about this from a customer support point of view, that the right amount of discoverable online learning, make sure that every minute that someone spends with customer support is value add. The same is true in a typical training setting. So if you were to do a face-to-face training, the ideal scenario when you're training customers or employees, the ideal scenario is that people are able to go at their own pace, and instead of being a lecturer at the extreme or an instructor even, that the person who's doing the training is a facilitator or a mentor or a coach, if you will. And the best learning experiences that I've observed and that we've helped participate in creating when it is what we would call a blended experience. So it's live, in person, but it's supported by an online experience, is making sure that whenever that learner needs help or needs guidance or needs to be given a broad context, that the facilitator is there for them. So here's a great example of using the right balance of in-person classroom-based training and online. And this is an example of, and this is actually a 3D spinnable kind of game-like experience, where the goal was to teach someone the basics of inspecting welds. But steel is expensive and steel is heavy. And when you train someone on how to inspect in a face-to-face setting, you need to carry with you a lot of stuff. And here's a great way to have a blended experience in person so that the learners are able to experience some of the stuff all at the same time, all at their own pace. And also you can totally see how this kind of a fun, engaging 3D experience can do wonders for an online learning where previously you couldn't do that at all. This is another example of the kind of work that Enable has done with our clients to promote success and engagement. It's really what it all boils down to. So the last slide is, what does success look like? Like, what is the end result of, call it training or call it customer support with online support material? I mean, as companies, we really want to get something out of all of this, and ideally this is about metrics, this is about measurement. We want to capture information about how our clients and our learners are going through the learning process. We want to make sure that they're successful, sure, and we can get that by seeing the results of quizzes and so on. But what about knowing how many times they clicked on this particular experience and how many times they watched that one over and over again, or where they asked the most questions, or where we lost them on the video and they phoned us up. Learning platforms can give you these metrics, and they can be a very powerful tool to enable you to continuously improve the training that you're giving, but also prove your ROI. I mean, this is, as I started at the top, I mean, I got in the middle there to talk about some of the wonders of what you can do with really effective training, but this oftentimes boils down to ROI, especially for our clients who are having to justify the expenditure to create great material, whether they're engaging us or whether they're doing it internally. Learning platforms can help drive this. And just as a simple example of a dashboard, I'll click this link, which is an example of a very rudimentary view that's showing, and these are not real students in this case, how individual learners are behaving through a series of experiences. And you can see in real time in this case who's doing what, how far they've gotten, how they're doing. And there's even some ability here for users to take pictures, take videos, generate reports, have that all be captured and analyzed by trainers, or maybe by their management, or even by a third party like Enable, who can help add value by ensuring that the learning is going the way you need it to, kind of acting like a consultant. Okay, so at the end of all of this, I've talked about several of the reasons for doing online training. I think a lot of them are self-evident. It's not, I hate to say it's not that hard because it's our bread and butter, but I think it's really, what I would rather say is it's not that hard to prove and to validate that there's a return on investment for doing this kind of work. And it's not easy to find the right resources internally who can drive really successful training experiences. And it's not easy to find the right platform to deliver them in. But I believe very strongly that there is a tremendous return on the investment for doing so, that there's a tremendous capability to use training of our customers to drive their behavior in such a way that it makes it easier for us to increase revenue, to drive their success up.